thought I knew what heartbreak felt like, until the day I stood in my wedding dress, waiting for a groom who never showed up. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part came when I checked our bank account and saw nothing but zeros. He'd taken everything, my money, my dreams, and 3 years of my life. And just when I thought the nightmare was over, I got a message that changed everything. You deserve to know the truth. D. What happened next? You won't believe it. I still remember standing in that bridal suite, looking at myself in the mirror, thinking this was it. The moment I'd been dreaming about since I was a little girl. My dress was perfect, my makeup was flawless, and my heart was absolutely racing. Everything had fallen into place so beautifully, you know? The flowers were stunning. The band had already started their sound check, and I could hear our guests arriving downstairs. I'd spent 18 months planning every single detail of this day. 18 months of Pinterest boards, vendor meetings, cake tastings, and seating chart nightmares. But it was all worth it, because I was about to marry the love of my life. Or at least, that's what I thought. Derek and I had been together for 3 years. We met at a coffee shop in downtown Chicago. Super cliche, I know, but it felt like destiny at the time. He was charming, successful, and he had this way of making me feel like I was the only person in the room. He worked in finance, or so he said, always dressed impeccably, and seemed to have his life together in ways I was still figuring out. I was a second-grade teacher, living paycheck to paycheck, trying to save up for a future that suddenly seemed within reach when he came into my life. He swept me off my feet, honestly. Fancy dinners, weekend getaways, and he even helped me pay off my student loans within the first year we were dating. Red flag? Maybe. But I was in love, and love makes you blind to things you'd normally question. The proposal was straight out of a movie. He rented out the entire rooftop of this gorgeous restaurant overlooking Lake Michigan, had a violinist playing our song, and got down on one knee with a ring that must have cost a fortune. I cried for what felt like hours. My mom cried. My best friend Sarah cried. Hell, even the violinist got a little teary-eyed. It was perfect. Too perfect if I'm being honest now. But back then, I just thought I was the luckiest woman alive. Planning the wedding became my entire world. Derek was supportive, or at least he seemed to be. He'd nod along when I showed him centerpiece options, smile when I talked about the menu, and he even sat through 3 different band auditions without complaining. Looking back, I realize he was just absent, physically there, but mentally somewhere else entirely. But I was so caught up in the excitement that I didn't notice. Or maybe I didn't want to notice. We decided to have a big wedding. 200 guests. Prime. Venue. Top shelf everything. My parents contributed what they could, but most of it came from our joint savings account. Derek insisted we combine our finances 6 months before the wedding. We're going to be married anyway, he'd said with that charming smile. Might as well start acting like it now. I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? This was the man I was going to spend the rest of my life with. The week before the wedding was absolute chaos. Final dress fittings, last-minute RSVPs, picking up the marriage license. All the little details that suddenly feel enormous. Derek seemed stressed, which I attributed to work. He'd been taking a lot of calls lately, always stepping out of the room to answer them. When I asked about it, he'd kiss my forehead and say it was just some big deal he was closing before the wedding. He wanted to focus entirely on us once we said, "I do," he explained. It made sense at the time. Everything he said made sense because I wanted to believe him. That's the thing about a really good golpe. The person executing it knows exactly what you want to hear. The rehearsal dinner was Friday night, and Derek was off. I can't explain it any other way. He was there. He smiled. He gave a beautiful speech about how lucky he was to have found me. But something in his eyes was different. Distant. My maid of honor, Sarah, pulled me aside at one point and asked if everything was okay with him. "He seems nervous," she said. I laughed it off. Of course. He's nervous. We're getting married tomorrow. But she looked unconvinced. Sarah had always been a good judge of character, better than me apparently. She never warmed up to Derek the way my other friends did. She said there was something about him she couldn't quite put her finger on. I should have listened to her. That night, Derek dropped me off at my apartment. We'd decided to spend the night before the wedding apart for tradition's sake, and he held me a little longer than usual. "I love you so much," he whispered into my hair. "You know that, right? No matter what happens, you need to know that I love you." I thought it was sweet, romantic even. Now those words make me sick to my stomach. He knew exactly what he was about to do, and he still looked me in the eye and said he loved me. That's not love. That's betrayal in its purest, most calculated form. Saturday morning came, and I woke up with this incredible mix of excitement and nerves. Sarah and my bridesmaids showed up at 8 with mimosas and breakfast sandwiches, and we spent the morning getting ready, laughing, taking a million pictures. The energy was electric. My mom kept crying. Happy tears, she insisted. And even my usually stoic dad got emotional when he saw me in my dress. Everything was going according to plan. The ceremony was set for 4 o'clock, and by 2:30 I was completely ready. Hair perfect, makeup flawless, dress looking like something out of a fairy tale. I felt beautiful. I felt ready. I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. We arrived at the venue at 3:15. The place looked absolutely stunning. White roses everywhere, string lights creating this magical ambiance, and the late afternoon sun casting this golden glow over everything. It was perfect, beyond perfect. Guests were already arriving, and I could hear the buzz of excitement. I stayed in the bridal suite, tradition and all, but I kept checking my phone for a text from Derek. Nothing. That was fine, though he was probably busy getting ready with his groomsmen. His best man, Mike, was supposed to make sure he got there on time. No worries. 3:45, still no text. I asked Sarah to check if Derek had arrived yet. She came back 5 minutes later with a forced smile. Not yet, but I'm sure he's on his way. You know, guys, they have no concept of time. We laughed, but I noticed she was gripping her phone a little too tightly. 4 o'clock. The ceremony should have been starting. Could hear the murmur of confused guests through the walls. Someone knocked on my door. It was the wedding coordinator, looking stressed. We're having a little delay, she said carefully. The groom hasn't arrived yet, but I'm sure it's just traffic. Chicago traffic could be brutal, so I tried to stay calm. Tried being the operative word. 4:15. My dad came to check on me, and I could see the worry in his eyes. Honey, have you heard from Derek? I shook my head, my hands starting to shake. I called him, straight to voicemail. I called again, voicemail, and again, and again. Each time that automated message felt like a punch to the gut. Sarah called Mike, the best man. It rang and rang, no answer. She tried the other groomsmen. Nothing. It was like they'd all vanished into thin air. The panic started setting in then, real and suffocating. This wasn't just a delay. Something was very, very wrong. 4:30. The wedding coordinator suggested we make an announcement. Maybe say the ceremony would be postponed. Postponed. The word felt surreal. How do you postpone a wedding when 200 people are sitting in their seats, dressed in their finest, waiting to watch you get married? My mom was crying, not happy tears anymore. My dad was on the phone, calling Derek's number over and over, getting increasingly angry. Sarah was trying to reach anyone who might know where he was. And me? I just stood there in my perfect dress, feeling the world crumble around me. 5 o'clock, an hour late. Someone suggested we might need to cancel. Cancel. Not postpone. Cancel. I felt nauseous. This couldn't be happening. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. And instead, I was standing in a bridal suite, abandoned and confused, with no idea where my fiancé was. Had he been in an accident? Was he hurt? Was he lying in a hospital somewhere? Those were the thoughts I clung to because the alternative, that he'd left me on purpose, was too devastating to consider. Sarah's phone rang. It was her brother who worked in IT. She'd asked him to try tracking Derek's phone, check his social media, anything. The color drained from her face as she listened to whatever he was saying. She hung up and looked at me, and I knew before she even opened her mouth that it was bad. His phone's been turned off. His social media accounts are gone, and she paused, like she didn't want to say the next part. And he closed his LinkedIn profile yesterday. The room went silent. You don't close your LinkedIn if you're planning on coming back. You don't turn off your phone and delete your social media if you're stuck in traffic. You do those things when you're running. The word golpe didn't enter my mind right then. All I could think was that he'd gotten cold feet, that he'd panicked and run away, but he'd come back. He had to come back. We'd work through this. People got scared of commitment all the time, right? But Sarah's next words shattered even that. Desperate hope. There's something else, she said quietly. Your joint bank account. When was the last time you checked it? I hadn't. I'd been so busy with last-minute wedding stuff that I hadn't looked at our finances in days. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands and logged into our banking app. And that's when my entire world collapsed. Zero. The balance showed $0.00. But that wasn't possible. We'd had over $60,000 in that account. My life savings. My parents' contribution to the wedding. The money Derek had supposedly added for our honeymoon and new apartment. All of it. Gone. I checked the transaction history, my vision blurring with tears. Large withdrawals starting 3 days ago. Cash withdrawals at different ATMs across the city. Wire transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. The last transaction was from this morning at 7 a.m. A final withdrawal that cleaned out every remaining penny. While I was getting ready to marry him. While I was putting on my wedding dress and dreaming about our future together, he was systematically stealing every dollar we had. I couldn't breathe. Literally couldn't catch my breath. Sarah was talking to me. My mom was crying. My dad was shouting something, but I couldn't hear any of it over the roaring in my ears. This wasn't cold feet. This wasn't panic. This was calculated, premeditated trahison. He'd planned this. Every moment of the last 3 years. Had any of it been real? Or had I been nothing more than a mark from the very beginning? The coffee shop meeting, the whirlwind romance, the proposal, the insistence on combining finances. Was it all just part of an elaborate con? My dad called the police. They showed up at the venue within 20 minutes, which would have been impressive if it wasn't so humiliating. Here I was, in my wedding dress, mascara running down my face, having to explain to 2 uniformed officers that my groom had disappeared and stolen all our money. They took notes, asked for Derek's information, his photo, any details I could provide about his family, his workplace, his friends, and that's when I realized I didn't know any of that. Not really. His parents were supposedly dead. He was an only child. His friends were always busy or out of town whenever I suggested meeting them. Mike, his best man, I'd met him exactly twice, and both times it was brief. Derek always had explanations for everything, and I'd accepted them without question, because I trusted him, because I loved him, and he'd used that love against me like a weapon. The officers were kind but honest. Cases like this were complicated. Without knowing his real whereabouts, without evidence of where the money went, it would be difficult to track him down quickly. They'd file a report, they'd investigate, but I shouldn't get my hopes up about a fast resolution. One of them mentioned something that made my blood run cold. "Ma'am, are you certain Derek Henderson was his real name?" Real name? Of course it was his real name, wasn't it? But suddenly I wasn't certain of anything anymore. The officer explained that they'd run a background check, but it would take some time. In the meantime, I should contact my bank, freeze any remaining accounts, change all my passwords, and document everything I could remember about Derek and our relationship. Telling the guests was the single most humiliating moment of my life. My dad went out there and made the announcement. "The wedding has been canceled. We apologize for the inconvenience." Canceled. Like it was a dentist appointment or a dinner reservation. Not the day I'd been dreaming about for years. Not the moment where I was supposed to become someone's wife. The guests filed out, some whispering, some crying, some angry on my behalf. Our elaborate dinner went uneaten. The band packed up without playing a single song. The beautiful cake sat there, untouched. 200 people had dressed up, traveled, taken time off work, and brought gifts for a wedding that would never happen because the groom was a con artist who'd been playing me for 3 years. That night, I sat in my apartment, the same apartment Derek had helped me pay rent for, which now felt contaminated, and tried to piece together what had happened. Sarah stayed with me because she was afraid I'd do something stupid, though I was too numb to do anything at all. I just kept replaying every moment of our relationship, looking for signs I'd missed. And, oh, there were so many. The way he never wanted to take photos together for social media, how he always paid in cash when we went out, his reluctance to meet my extended family, the time he lost his driver's license and never seemed to get around to replacing it, the fact that he never, not once, introduced me to anyone from his past. Every red flag I'd ignored because I was in love was now glaring at me in hindsight. The next few days were a blur of humiliation and bureaucracy. I called the bank to report the fraud, but since Derek was an authorized user on the account, and I'd willingly added him, there wasn't much they could do. I filed police reports, gave statements, provided every text message and photo I had of him. The venue required payment for the reception we never had. Turns out the deposit didn't cover everything, and I was liable for the balance. The photographer, the florist, the band, all of them sent invoices for services rendered or contracted. I'd been financially devastated, and now I was drowning in debt for a wedding that never happened. The police investigation moved slowly, too slowly. They ran Derek's name and discovered what they'd suspected. Derek Henderson wasn't entirely fake, but the person I'd known certainly was. There was a Derek Henderson with that face, but he died in a car accident in Arizona 5 years ago. My Derek had stolen a dead man's identity. Whoever I'd been in a relationship with, whoever I'd almost married, was a complete stranger. The police found a pattern, though, and that's when things got really dark. My detective, a woman named Maria Chen, sat me down a week after the wedding that never was and showed me a file. "You need to prepare yourself," she said. "You're not his first victim. There were others. 4 other women across 3 different states over the past 7 years. Different names, different identities, but the same face, the same con. He'd romance them, get them to trust him, gain access to their finances, and then disappear right before or right after a major financial commitment. Sometimes it was a wedding, sometimes a house purchase. Once it was a business investment. The amounts varied, but the pattern was identical. And he was good at it. So good that none of the previous victims had managed to lead police to him. He'd cover his tracks, vanish completely, and resurface months or years later with a new identity in a new city. I wasn't special. I wasn't even unique. I was just the latest mark in a long line of women whose hearts and bank accounts he'd emptied. Detective Chen showed me photos of the other women. They all looked eerily similar to me. Mid-20s to early 30s, professional but not wealthy. Kind faces, the type who'd believe in true love. He had a type, and he hunted us specifically. The detective explained that he was likely part of a larger network, that he probably wasn't working alone, that these kinds of long-term cons often involved multiple people playing different roles. Mike, the best man, probably an accomplice. Derek's various work trips, likely scouting his next victim or maintaining relationships with other marks. The thought made me sick. How many other women had he been seeing while he was with me? How many other lives was he destroying simultaneously? The worst part was the gaslighting I'd experienced without even knowing it. Detective Chen pointed out dozens of manipulation tactics he'd used. Love bombing in the early stages to create dependency. Isolation from friends who might question him. Sarah had been right to be suspicious, and he'd known it, which is why he'd always found excuses for us to skip events she attended. Financial entanglement to make it harder for me to leave and easier for him to steal. The rushed timeline for marriage. 3 years sounds long, but he'd been pushing for a shorter engagement. I'd been the one to insist on 18 months to plan, properly. And now I realized that had frustrated him. He'd wanted to get in and out faster. Every romantic gesture had been calculated. Every "I love you" had been a lie. Our entire relationship had been nothing but an elaborate golpe designed to rob me blind. The anger came later. At first, I was just hollow, empty, but around week 3, the rage set in. I'd wake up in the middle of the night shaking with fury. How dare he? How dare he take 3 years of my life, my money, my trust, my love, and treat it all like it meant nothing? How dare he make me question every moment of happiness I'd felt? I wanted him caught. I wanted him punished. I wanted him to feel even a fraction of the pain he'd caused me and those other women. But wanting it didn't make it happen. The police investigation continued, but there were no leads. He'd disappeared like smoke, and I was left with the wreckage. I threw myself into trying to rebuild. I picked up extra tutoring gigs to pay off the wedding. Debts. I moved to a smaller, cheaper apartment because I couldn't afford my place anymore. I deleted every photo of Derek from my phone, my computer, my life. I changed my number so I wouldn't keep staring at it, hoping he'd call with some explanation, some apology, some indication that he was human and not just a monster in a nice suit. My friends rallied around me, but I could see the pity in their eyes. Sarah tried to set me up on dates, but the thought of trusting another man made me want to throw up. How could I ever date again? How could I ever trust my own judgment? I'd been so wrong about Derek. What if I was wrong about everyone? Months passed. Summer turned to fall, and I tried to move on. Therapy helped somewhat. My therapist specialized in trauma and abuse, and she helped me understand that what I'd experienced was a form of emotional and financial abuse. She helped me work through the shame. Because yes, I felt ashamed. Like I should have known better. Like I was stupid. For falling for his act. She reminded me that he was a professional con artist. That fooling people was literally his job. That I wasn't weak or dumb for believing someone I loved. Intellectually, I understood that. Emotionally, I still felt like an idiot. I thought I was healing. Slowly. Painfully. But healing nonetheless. I'd stopped crying every day. I'd stopped checking the news obsessively for stories about a con artist getting arrested. I'd even started considering maybe, eventually, possibly trying to date again. Not soon, but someday. And then, 4 months after the wedding that never was, I received a message that changed everything. It came through Facebook Messenger from an account with no profile picture and no information. The name was just a string of numbers. The message was short. You deserve to know the truth. He's not who you think he is. If you want answers, meet me. Below that was an address, a diner in a suburb about 30 miles outside Chicago, and a time, 6 p.m. tomorrow. And then, at the bottom, making my blood run cold, D. My first instinct was that it was spam or a prank, but that initial at the end, D. Derek, it had to be. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I screenshotted the message and sent it to Detective Chen immediately, then to Sarah. The detective called within 10 minutes. "Don't go," she said firmly. "It could be dangerous. Let us handle it." But handle what? They didn't have jurisdiction to set up a sting based on an anonymous message that might not even be from him. Besides, I could hear it in her voice. She didn't think it was real. She thought someone was messing with me, feeding off my trauma for kicks. But I knew it was him. Don't ask me how. I just knew. Maybe it was the arrogance of reaching out, the audacity of thinking I'd actually show up. Or maybe it was the wording, "You deserve to know the truth," playing on my desperate need for answers. It was manipulative and cruel, and exactly his style. Sarah was adamantly against me going, "Are you insane? He stole everything from you. What if he's trying to hurt you? What if this is part of some bigger plan?" Valid concerns, all of them. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was my only chance to get answers. The police weren't getting anywhere. The case was going cold. If I didn't take this opportunity, I might never know why. Why me? Why any of this? What was the point of it all? I agonized over the decision all night. The smart thing would be to ignore it, block the account, move on with my life. But I'd never been good at letting things go, and this was eating me alive. I needed closure. Or maybe I needed venganza. I wasn't entirely sure anymore. The line between the two had blurred significantly. By morning, I'd made my decision. I was going to that diner, but I wasn't going to be stupid about it. I told Sarah the plan, made her promise to call the police if I didn't check in every 30 minutes, shared my location with her continuously, and I'd record everything on my phone. If Derek wanted to talk, I'd listen, but I'd also make damn sure he couldn't hurt me again. The drive to the diner felt surreal. It was a gray November afternoon, the kind where the sky is so heavy with clouds it feels like it's pressing down on you. The diner was one of those classic American spots. Red vinyl booths, checkered floors, a flickering neon sign out front. I sat in my car for 10 minutes after arriving, watching the entrance, trying to calm my racing heart. This was crazy. This was absolutely insane. But I was here, and I was going to see it through. I walked in at exactly 6 p.m. The place was mostly empty. A couple of truckers at the counter, a tired-looking waitress refilling coffee, and in the back corner booth, someone in a hoodie with their back to me. My stomach dropped. I recognized that posture, those shoulders. Even after everything, some part of me still recognized him. I walked over on legs that felt like jelly and slid into the booth across from him. He looked up, and I had to suppress a gasp. He looked terrible. Derek, or whatever his name really was, had always been meticulously groomed. Perfect hair, expensive clothes, that polished look that screamed success. The man across from me was gaunt, unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous energy that was almost palpable. For a split second, I almost felt bad for him. Almost. Then I remembered what he'd done, and the sympathy evaporated. "Hello, Emma," he said, and even his voice sounded different. Tired, defeated, not the confident, charming tone I remembered. "That's not your name, is it?" I said, proud that my voice didn't shake. "Derek Henderson. That's not who you are." He smiled, but it was sad. "No, it's not." He paused like he was debating whether to continue. "It's Michael Torres. At least that was my name before I became Derek, and James before that, and Tyler before that." He rattled off the names like they meant nothing, like he was listing grocery items instead of stolen identities and ruined lives. I wanted to scream at him, to throw my water in his face, to demand answers, but I stayed quiet, letting him talk. "You want to know why?" he said. It wasn't a question. They all want to know why. The truth is, I don't have a good reason, not one that'll make you feel better anyway. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times, but that now felt like a stranger's movement. I was young when I started this. 22, broke, desperate. Met a guy who taught me the game, said it was easy money, that the women never even reported it because they were too embarrassed. And he was right. The first few times it was about the money. I needed it to survive. But then, he trailed off, and I found my voice. But then what? It became fun? You enjoyed destroying people's lives? The bitterness in my tone was sharp enough to cut. He flinched. No, not fun. But it became who I was. The only thing I knew how to do. I'd tell myself I'd stop after the next one, that I'd go straight, get a real job, live a normal life. But then I'd run out of money, or I'd get bored, or I'd convince myself that one more time wouldn't hurt. It became an addiction, Emma. The con, the performance, the victory. I know that doesn't make it okay. Nothing makes it okay. "Why did you contact me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why now? If you're so good at disappearing, why risk reaching out?" He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Guilt. Real, genuine guilt. "Because you're different," he said. "The others, I could walk away and not think about them. But you," he shook his head. "I don't know. Maybe I actually did fall for you somewhere along the way. Maybe that's why I feel like garbage for what I did. Or maybe I'm just getting old and tired of running. I laughed, but it was bitter. You fell for me? You have a funny way of showing love, Michael or Derek or whoever you are. You stole 3 years of my life and $60,000. You humiliated me in front of 200 people. You made me question everything about myself. If that's your version of love, I'd hate to see what you do to people you don't care about. He nodded, accepting the hit. You're right. I'm a terrible person. I've done terrible things, but I wanted you to. No, it wasn't all fake. Some of it was real, and I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed to tell you. The apology should have felt good. For months, I'd fantasized about him apologizing, about him feeling remorse. But now that it was happening, it felt empty. Words couldn't give me back the money, the time, the trust, or the version of myself that had believed in true love. What do you want from me? I asked. Forgiveness? Absolution? Because you're not getting either. He shook his head. No, I don't deserve forgiveness. I wanted to give you something, though. Information. About the money. My heart skipped a beat. What about it? He reached into his pocket and I tensed, ready to run. But he just pulled out a piece of paper and slid it across the table. Wire transfer information. Offshore accounts. I can't give you back everything. I spent some of it, but most of it's still there. $52,000. It's yours. I'll cooperate with the police. Provide whatever information they need to process it. Consider it restitution. I stared at the paper like it might bite me. Why? Why give it back now? He shrugged. Maybe I'm tired of running. Maybe I want to do one decent thing before I go to prison. Or maybe I just wanted to see you one last time and pretend for a moment that I was the man you thought I was. He stood up, dropping some cash on the table for the coffee he hadn't touched. The information's real. Give it to your detective. She'll be able to trace it. And Emma, I really am sorry, for what it's worth. He started to walk away, and I should have let him go. I should have called Detective Chen right then and had him arrested. But instead, I found myself asking, were you ever going to go through with it? The wedding? He paused, his back to me. I don't know, he said quietly. Part of me wanted to. Part of me thought maybe I could actually be that person for you. But I've been running too long. I don't know how to stop. And then he was gone, walking out of the diner and into the parking lot, leaving me alone with a piece of paper and more questions than answers. I sat there for a long time after he left, staring at the wire transfer information. My phone buzzed. Sarah checking in. I texted her back that I was okay, that I'd explain everything soon. Then I called Detective Chen. She answered on the first ring, and I told her everything. She dispatched units to the diner immediately, but I knew he'd be long gone by the time they arrived. He'd planned this meeting carefully, chosen a location where he could disappear easily, but he'd also given me exactly what I needed to start getting my life back. The wire transfer information was legitimate. Detective Chen and the FBI, because yes, it escalated to the FBI once they realized the scope of his operation, were able to trace the accounts and freeze them. It took months of legal proceedings, but eventually, I got back $52,000. Not everything, but enough to pay off the wedding debts and start rebuilding my savings. More importantly, the information Michael provided led to the arrest of 2 of his accomplices, including Mike, the fake best man. They rolled on him, providing details about his operation, his other identities, his methods. A warrant was issued for his arrest under multiple names, but Michael Torres himself, he vanished again. The FBI believes he left the country, possibly to South America or Southeast Asia, somewhere without extradition treaties. They're still looking, but I've accepted that I might never see him face justice. The other victims and I have formed a support group of sorts. We share information, support each other through the legal processes, and remind each other that we're survivors, not victims. We were targeted by a professional because we were kind, trusting, and loving, and those aren't flaws, even if they were exploited. The trahison I experienced changed me, fundamentally. I'm more cautious now, more guarded. I verify things I would have taken on faith before. I keep my finances separate and protected. I've learned to listen to that little voice of doubt, instead of dismissing it as paranoia. Some might say I've become cynical, but I prefer to think I've become wise. There's a difference between closing yourself off and protecting yourself, and I'm learning to walk that line. Do I regret meeting him at that diner? Sometimes. It gave me closure, but it also complicated my feelings. It's easier to hate someone when they're purely evil, when there's no nuance or humanity. Michael showing remorse, returning most of the money, and actually seeming sorry. It muddied the waters, but my therapist says that's okay. People are complex. Con artists are still people, even terrible ones. Hating him and understanding him aren't mutually exclusive. I can acknowledge his humanity while still being furious about what he did. The real revenge, I've learned, isn't about seeing him in prison or getting every penny back. It's about refusing to let him destroy my capacity for joy, trust, and love. It's about rebuilding my life into something even better than it was before. It's about taking the lessons I learned, the hard, painful ones, and using them to become stronger. He tried to break me, to reduce me to nothing more than a mark, a payday, a tragic story. But I'm still here. I'm still standing. And I'm still capable of trusting, even if it's more carefully now. I eventually did start dating again. Slowly, cautiously, with a lot of vetting and boundaries that might have seemed excessive but felt necessary. I met someone good, someone patient who understood my baggage and didn't push me to move faster than I was ready. We've been together for 8 months now, and while I sometimes catch myself looking for red flags that aren't there, I'm learning to let go of that fear. Not everyone is a con artist. Not every person who says they love me is lying. Michael was an exception, not the rule, and I refuse to let one terrible experience ruin all future possibilities. The anniversary of the wedding that never was came and went. I spent it with Sarah and my close friends, celebrating not what I lost, but what I survived. We had an unwedding party, wore comfortable clothes, ate pizza, and watched terrible reality TV. It was perfect. No stress, no expectations, just people who genuinely cared about me being present. That's what I should have had all along. Authentic connections, not elaborate performances. I still think about that day sometimes. The dress, the venue, the flowers, standing in that bridal suite waiting for a groom who would never come. It hurts less now, but it still hurts. I mourn not just the relationship, but the version of myself who could love so freely, so completely, without reservation. Michael took that from me, and I hate him for it. But I'm also grateful, in a weird way. He taught me lessons I needed to learn about protecting myself, about the reality that not everyone who smiles at you has good intentions, about the importance of trusting my instincts. The other women from his previous cons have become friends. We meet quarterly, share updates about our lives, and remind each other how far we've come. One of them is engaged now, for real this time, to a wonderful man who knew her whole story and loved her anyway. Another went back to school and is finishing her master's degree. We're all rebuilding, all surviving, all refusing to let one terrible man define our stories. Detective Chen calls occasionally with updates. There have been sightings, someone matching Michael's description in Buenos Aires, then later in Thailand, most recently in Morocco. But by the time authorities arrive, he's already gone. She's optimistic they'll catch him eventually. People like him always slip up, she says. They get comfortable, they make a mistake, and that's when we get them. I hope she's right. Not because I need revenge anymore. I'm past that. But because I don't want him doing this to anyone else. There's probably a woman out there right now, falling in love with whatever name he's using, planning a future that will never exist. That thought keeps me up at night sometimes. I've started speaking at fraud prevention seminars and support groups for financial abuse survivors. Telling my story is still hard. There's always that moment of shame when I have to admit I didn't see it coming, but it's also empowering. If my experience can help even one person recognize the signs of a con, spot the red flags I missed, or feel less alone in their own situation, then maybe it wasn't all for nothing. People always ask the same questions. How did you not know? Weren't there signs? And yes, of course there were signs. But hindsight is 20/20, and love is blinding. When you trust someone completely, you rationalize away the inconsistencies. That's what these con artists count on. They're predators who've perfected the art of finding kind, trusting people, and exploiting those exact qualities. The money I got back helped tremendously, but the real recovery has been emotional and psychological. I had to rebuild my sense of self-worth from the ground up. For months, I felt like damaged goods, like I had a scarlet letter announcing to the world that I'd been fooled. My therapist helped me reframe that narrative. I wasn't fooled because I was stupid. I was targeted because I was empathetic and loving. Those are strengths, not weaknesses. Yes, I need to balance them with discernment and self-protection now, but I shouldn't be ashamed of my capacity to care deeply. That's a beautiful thing, even if someone weaponized it against me. My students, those second graders I teach, have been an unexpected source of healing. They don't know what happened, obviously, but their innocence and joy remind me that the world isn't entirely full of people like Michael. Most people are good. Most people mean what they say. Most relationships are built on genuine affection, not calculated manipulation. I can't let one skilled liar make me cynical about humanity as a whole. That would be letting him win, and I refuse to give him that satisfaction. There are still hard days when I wonder if I'll ever fully trust again. if I'll ever love without that nagging voice in the back of my mind, questioning every inconsistency. Days when I see a man in a suit who looks vaguely like Derek, and my heart races with panic. Days when I check my bank account obsessively, even though I know it's secure. Trauma doesn't just disappear because you've processed it intellectually. It lives in your body, in your reactions, in those moments when your nervous system remembers the threat, even though your mind knows it's over. But those days are becoming less frequent, and I've learned to be patient with myself through them. I changed a lot about my approach to relationships after this. I'm no longer the person who falls fast and hard, who ignores red flags because the fairy tale is so appealing. I do background checks now, not obsessively, but reasonably. I verify employment, I meet friends and family, I take things slow. Some might say that's sad, that I've lost my romantic spontaneity, but I say it's smart. Real love doesn't rush. Real love welcomes transparency. Real love doesn't ask you to ignore your instincts or silence your doubts. If someone truly cares about you, they'll understand your need for security after what you've been through. The wedding industry reached out after my story went viral. Yes, it went viral. Because apparently abandoned brides who get scammed for $60,000 make for compelling content. Several wedding insurance companies now use my case as an example of why couples need fraud protection. A few venues have implemented stricter identity verification for vendors and parties. It's a small silver lining, I suppose. If my nightmare prevents someone else from experiencing the same betrayal, then at least some good came from it. I think about that message he sent sometimes. You deserve to know the truth. The audacity of that statement still astounds me. Did I deserve to know the truth? Absolutely. But I deserved to know it 3 years earlier, before I'd invested my heart, my time, and my money into a relationship with a ghost. The truth he gave me at that diner was too little, too late, but I took it anyway, because at that point I was desperate for anything that might help me understand how I'd gotten there, and in a twisted way, it did help. Knowing it was never real, that he was a professional con artist, and I wasn't uniquely foolish, made it easier to forgive myself. The question everyone asks is whether I'd do anything differently if I could go back. The easy answer is yes. I'd run the moment I met him. I'd never combine finances. I'd listen to Sarah's concerns. But the honest answer is more complicated. I don't know if I would have done anything differently, because I didn't know then what I know now. I made the best decisions I could with the information I had. That's all anyone can do. The Gulpy worked because he was good at it, not because I was bad at spotting it. That's an important distinction, one I had to learn to accept. My relationship with money changed fundamentally after this. I used to be fairly casual about finances. I saved some, I spent some, I trusted that things would work out. Now I'm meticulous. I have spreadsheets, I track every penny. I have multiple savings accounts with different security measures. Some might call it paranoid, but I call it being prepared. Financial abuse is real, and financial recovery is hard. I'm not going to leave myself vulnerable like that again. Ever. My money is mine, and I protect it fiercely now. The support I received from my community was overwhelming. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years reached out. My school organized a fundraiser to help with the wedding debts. My church held a special service that was basically an unwedding, celebrating my strength and resilience. Even strangers on the internet, and yes, the story made it to Reddit and Twitter, sent kind messages and donated to a GoFundMe my sister set up without my permission. I was mortified at first, accepting charity, but my therapist pointed out that letting people help me was also a form of healing. It rebuilt my faith in humanity, reminded me that for every con artist out there are thousands of genuinely good people who want to help. I've thought a lot about what drives someone to become a con artist like Michael. Detective Chen shared that many of them have antisocial personality disorder or sociopathic tendencies, an inability to form genuine emotional connections, a lack of empathy, a view of other people as objects to be used. Understanding that helped in a weird way. It meant nothing I could have done differently would have changed the outcome. He didn't betray me because I wasn't good enough, or because our relationship wasn't strong enough. He betrayed me because that's what he does. It's who he is. The scorpion stings because it's a scorpion, not because the frog did anything wrong. Looking back at our relationship through the lens of what I know now is like watching a horror movie where you can see the monster, but the protagonist can't. All those sweet gestures, paying off my student loans, helping with rent, the lavish proposal, weren't acts of love. They were investments designed to build trust, so he could make a bigger score later. The way he isolated me from Sarah and other friends who might have questioned him wasn't because he was possessive. It was strategic. The combined finances, the rushed engagement, the expensive wedding that depleted my savings before he took off with what was left. All calculated moves in a long game I didn't even know we were playing. The anger comes in waves still, not as often as it used to, but when it hits hard. I'll be going about my day, and something will remind me of him. A cologne scent, a song that played at one of our dates, a movie we watched together, and suddenly I'm furious all over again. Furious at him for the trahison, furious at myself for not seeing it, furious at a world where people like him can operate with relative impunity. My therapist says that's normal, that healing isn't linear, that I'm allowed to be angry. Some days I think I've moved on completely, and other days I want to scream. The legal system's response to romance fraud is frustratingly inadequate. Unless you can prove it meets specific criteria for wire fraud or identity theft, it's often treated as a civil matter rather than a criminal one. The line between he lied to me and he committed fraud is blurrier than you'd think legally. Many victims never see justice because the burden of proof is so high, and the perpetrators are so skilled at covering their tracks. The FBI agent assigned to the case explained that romance scams are a multi-billion-dollar industry globally, and they simply don't have the resources to pursue every case aggressively. It's enraging, but it's reality. I've had to accept that closure might never come in the form I wanted. Michael might never face trial. I might never get to confront him in a courtroom or hear a judge sentence him. He might live out his days in some foreign country, running the same con on different women, never facing consequences for the devastation he's left in his wake. That's a bitter pill to swallow, but it's also freeing in a way. My healing can't be dependent on external justice. I have to find peace within myself, regardless of whether he's ever held accountable. The relationship I have now, the healthy one, with someone who's patient and understanding, looks nothing like what I had with Michael. It's slower, steadier, built on actual trust, rather than manufactured chemistry. We've had conversations about my trauma, about my triggers, about the ways I need reassurance sometimes, even when logically I know he's trustworthy. And you know what? He doesn't make me feel crazy for needing those things. He meets me where I am. That's what real love looks like. Not grand gestures and whirlwind romance, but consistency, transparency, and genuine care for each other's well-being. I've learned that revenge isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about reclaiming your life and refusing to stay broken. Every day that I wake up and choose joy, choose trust, choose to keep living fully despite what happened, that's revenge. Every time I share my story and help someone else avoid the same fate, that's revenge. Every accomplishment, every genuine relationship, every moment of peace I've fought for, all of it is revenge against a man who tried to reduce me to nothing more than a payday and a cautionary tale. He wanted to destroy me, and I'm still here, stronger than before. That's the ultimate form of venganza. The other day, I went through my storage unit and found the wedding dress. I'd boxed it up immediately after that day, unable to look at it, standing there holding that white gown, which I'd spent so much time choosing, which had felt so perfect, which represented so many dreams. I felt sad, but not devastated. It was like looking at an artifact from someone else's life. I donated it to a charity that provides wedding dresses to brides who can't afford them. Someone else will wear it, someone else will make happy memories in it, and that feels right. That dress deserved a better story than the one I could give it. Life moves forward whether you're ready or not. It's been almost 2 years now since the wedding that never was. 2 years of therapy, growth, setbacks, breakthroughs, and painful lessons learned. I'm not the same person I was then, that naive, trusting woman who believed love conquered all. But I'm also not the broken, terrified woman I was in the immediate aftermath. I'm somewhere in between, and I'm okay with that. I'm a survivor who's still learning to trust, a fighter who's still processing anger, a believer who's become cautiously optimistic. I'm complicated now, layered, harder to know, but maybe more worth knowing because of it. Sometimes I wonder what I'd say if I saw Michael again. I've played out the scenario 1,000 times in my head. Would I scream at him? Demand answers? Walk away? Call the police? The truth is, I don't think I'd say anything. I'd let the authorities handle it, and I'd walk away knowing that he's not my problem anymore. He's a chapter in my story, not the whole book. And my story is still being written, filled with real relationships, genuine love, hard-won wisdom, and the kind of strength you only get from surviving something that should have destroyed you. The wedding I'll have someday, if I choose to get married again, will look completely different. It'll be smaller, more intimate, focused on the actual commitment rather than the performance. It'll be with someone who's earned my trust slowly, consistently, over time. It'll be in front of people who've proven themselves, not just anyone with an invitation. And it'll be a celebration not just of love, but of survival, resilience, and the courage it takes to try again after you've been devastated. That's the wedding I deserve, And someday, when I'm ready, that's the wedding I'll have. For now, I'm focused on rebuilding the parts of myself that got damaged along the way. I'm relearning how to trust my judgment. I'm working on letting go of the shame that still creeps in sometimes. I'm practicing gratitude for the good people in my life who stuck by me through the worst of it. I'm becoming someone who's been through hell but came out on the other side with compassion intact. That's no small feat. Michael tried to turn me cynical, bitter, closed off. Instead, I'm becoming discerning but still open, cautious but still capable of love, wounded but still whole. The money's been recovered. The legal proceedings are mostly done. The physical evidence of that day has been donated or discarded, but the emotional work continues, and I've accepted that it might continue for the rest of my life. Some traumas don't fully heal. They just become integrated into who you are. The trick is not letting them define you. I'm Emma, the second grade, teacher who loves her job. Emma, the friend who shows up for people. Emma, the daughter who's closer to her parents now than ever. Emma, who survived a Golpe that would have broken a lot of people. That last part is part of my identity now, but it's not all of it, not even close. If there's one thing I want people to take away from my story, it's this. If something feels off, trust that feeling. Your intuition exists for a reason, and if someone tries to isolate you, rush you, or make you feel crazy for having doubts, run. Real love doesn't operate that way. Real love is patient, transparent, and secure enough to welcome questions. Real love doesn't require you to ignore red flags or silence your concerns. And if you find yourself in a situation like mine, know that it's not your fault. Con artists are professionals. They study human psychology. They practice their craft. They refine their methods. Being fooled by one doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human. The final piece of the puzzle came 6 months ago. Detective Chen called with news. They'd caught him. Not for what he did to me, but for attempting the same con in Portugal. A woman there had been smarter, more suspicious. She'd reported him earlier in the relationship, and authorities had been watching. They caught him mid-scam with enough evidence to prosecute. He's facing extradition to the United States to face charges for all of us, all the women he'd defrauded over the years. The trial's scheduled for next year, and I'll be there to give my victim impact statement. Not for closure. I've already found that within myself, but to look him in the eye one more time and let him see that he didn't break me, that despite his best efforts, I'm still here, still standing, still fighting, and that's the greatest revenge of all. So there you have it, my story of betrayal, survival, and the revenge that came from refusing to stay broken. It's been a hell of a journey, and honestly, some days I still can't believe it all happened. But here I am, stronger than I ever thought possible. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had your trust shattered by someone you loved? How did you find the strength to move forward? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's support each other through these stories. And hey, if this resonated with you, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for what's coming next. Thanks for listening to my story. It means more than you know.